Hello, I'm live here at 7 o'clock on Eastern Time Zone. Oh, we already have a few people. That's cool. Welcome to the live stream. We are here to talk about anything mental health related. I try to do this every 7 o'clock on Sunday. My brain isn't working great, so we'll see how this one goes. Might end early if I don't feel great, but I would love to hear your chat questions. So what we do here is I put first priority on anything in the chat. Oh, but I remember now. I think I forgot to do this last week. I'm going to put in the chat the phone number, which is my office number. And please text any questions if you want to be anonymous. How do you spell anonymous? That's not how to spell anonymous. I put way too many N's in anonymous. And then anonymous. And then anonymous. Okay? And then I'm going to pin that message there. Message pin. Okay. So basically, if you are worried about confidentiality, you can just text that number and no one online will know. Anonymous. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I eventually did get the spell check. But and thank you for the like, whoever gave me that like. I appreciate that. That helps the algorithm. But also feel free to just chat and just put it in the chat for anything related to mental health. I will put that as the first priority to share with you guys and answer your questions and talk about mental health. But with that said, if we don't have anything in the chat, any questions or concerns or comments on mental health related stuff, I just talk about mental health stuff. And today I was thinking that I was going to start talking a little bit about ACT specifically, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a newer form of mental health therapy, and we've really come a long way when it comes to mental health. So giving you a little bit of a backdrop on what's going on with psychology and where this all came from. Psychology actually started with what is now considered abnormal psychology being the main focus. So essentially when brains got injured and we were focusing on what is abnormal, what is unique about people and the way their brains function or don't function. And so they started studying that and they realized, oh, there's actually a lot of things going on here between these ears that make it very complicated with human patterns of behavior. So then we, of course, go capitalistic and we go, how do we make money from this? And that turned into stuff around choice architecture, which is basically the design of which you can frame. Thank you for the next like I got. You can frame a specific choice in a way that will predict the answer. So in other words, here's my favorite choice architecture example. They were trying to get people to donate their organs to, medical, reasons when they die. And they, when you fill out your thing at the DMV, they were thinking of all these things. What could we do to motivate people to actually check the box that has them become an organ donor? And they tried a bunch of different things to try to influence people to do that, but none of them seemed to work. And then finally, someone brilliant was like, why don't we just make it an opt-out box? So you have to check the box if you don't want to become an organ donor. And wouldn't you know, that worked wonderfully. And now all of a sudden, all these people are organ donors, because in the end, Americans don't like having to check a box. Waving the pen like that, that's a lot of effort. So that's choice architecture. It's basically designing and framing things, and it could be done for good, for money, for evil, but designing things that you by default are going to do the thing that the person designing the test wants you to do. So advertising studied psychology and human behavior to try to manipulate people into buying certain products. And that was psychology. And still to this day, when you talk about somebody who is a psychologist, so this might all be fascinating. I don't know. Again, I will answer any questions in the chat. So if you're bored by this, don't tune out, get another chat question in, and I'll switch to that subject. But in terms of what a psychologist is, it is the study of the mind. It is a study of human behavior, but not necessarily, and thank you for the next like, for health reasons. It could be for money. It could be for research. It could be for a lot of different things. I remember I was at a wedding of a former youth kid of mine, and I ended up being at the table with a bunch of psychologists. And here as a counselor, I'm thinking, oh, we have so much in common. And then, oh, thank you. I'm in the chat that said, I appreciate the lesson. So I thought we are all going to be very therapeutic minded. I noticed pretty quickly that they were a little different than I was. They were bad guys, don't get me wrong, but they definitely were not empathic individuals. They weren't caring. They weren't loving. And as I discussed it, I realized pretty quickly, and they admitted it fully. They were like, oh yeah, we would never give somebody therapy. We are into research. We're into data. We like to study things, and we are trying to figure out how our companies can make more money. That's why we exist as psychologists. So for the psychologists in that study, it was not actually anything therapeutic. So in therapy, there are psychologists who are clinical psychologists. They focus on actually giving people therapy. There are therapists, counselors, social workers. Now, social workers can be working for the state and doing different things, working for different organizations, or they can be giving therapy. And it just kind of depends on what their specialty is, what they're getting. So I got a question. Can unexpected health challenges cause realistic depression, anxiety, or even PTSD? Absolutely. And so when it comes to like diagnosing people, we look at what is the primary cause of the thing. And if it is a physical symptom, that we wouldn't necessarily diagnose you, but it definitely will come with, we don't diagnose you with major depressive episode disorder, right? If it's a actual unexpected health challenge that's causing it. But that depression, anxiety, PTSD is a little different, but can actually absolutely come from unexpected health challenges. And what's great about ACT, speeding up the whole thing from the psychologist, I got a little distracted, is that it is focusing on wellness, and it is focusing on moving you forward. So it's not focusing on diagnosis. It's not focusing on what is abnormal about your brain. We'll leave that to the organ donor problem. What instead it is focusing on is how you can accept, choose, and take action, which, by the way, that's an acronym for ACT. Accept, choose, and take action. There's way more to ACT than that, but when you're experiencing unexpected health challenges, the first tool that you want to use is often acceptance. What are the things that I cannot change, that I have to accept, and how can I best process those emotions with both honoring, and this is the balance in ACT, honoring the sadness, grief, pain, struggle, frustration, all of the different emotions that are present in my limitations because of these unexpected health challenges. And then what choices can I make that help me not only put my health in the best possible light, but also move forward in a way that's still engaging in life that matters to me. Because the principle of ACT that kind of has an umbrella over everything, and the center is it psychological flexibility. But what we're trying to do is create a life worth living, right? We want to get deeper engaged in a life that matters. And when all of a sudden you cannot engage in the life that matters to you in the way that you thought you were going to be able to because you expected to have health, and now your health challenges are severely limiting what life choices you can make, you want to look at those things, still accepting it, but now taking action to choose what best moves you to that life as close as you can get. Someone said, I had health problems that caused depression and anxiety. Yeah, for sure. And honestly, here's a microcosm that's not as big a deal, but I started to not exactly feel, I wouldn't say depression, but I started to feel way more sadness than I have in a long time. And I used to suffer from depression. And so I kind of freaked out a little bit, not freaked out, but I was like going, what's this going on? What's this? What's this? Why am I all of a sudden feeling sadness? Am I losing my growth? Am I, backsliding? And as I was processing that, my first thought was maybe I just live in Florida and it's the summer and it's hot and I'm miserable. And so I'm tired all the time and I have lethargy. And then I did a vacation up in Michigan and I felt way better about everything in life. And I realized, yep, that was confirmation. It's just seasonal depression. I don't handle the summer well. Our brains, bodies are complicated machines. And it is absolutely the case that there's so many different things that influence how we feel. So sometimes feeling sick, you just get sad. A lot of my depression, I think, growing up as a kid, became conditioned and wired. So it was a problem even when I started to get better from chronic pain. But a lot of it was the direct result of being in chronic pain as a child. So I grew up, for those of you who don't know, with chronic migraines, cluster headaches. And from the time I was born to about the time, well, I actually had a year gap at 17 where a nutrition product really helped me get better. And then for whatever reason, the results stopped being consistent with that product. And I was still struggling with migraines through college and had these battles until about, I want to say 8 years ago, when I started a very extreme diet and exercise program that a lot of fasting that helped me no longer be in chronic pain. It's a long story, but I grew up being pretty miserable because I was in physical pain all the time and I had limitations. And the worst part for me, well, the worst part was the pain. Pain sucks, as one of my friends said, one of my philosophic friends. And so being in physical pain all the time was not fun. And then having people question my pain was really frustrating growing up because I looked physically healthy and people would expect me to be physically healthy. But I was struggling underneath it all. And so that was an extra challenge that made life a lot more isolating. And still to this day, I have limitations. I don't suffer from the same chronic pain that I used to. But I still have to do these extreme things or I feel worse. I was trying to talk, this is a comment now. Someone said, I was trying to talk to someone today about isolating and avoiding people. A great recipe for happiness. No. Their perspective was that they are doing better mentally, depression and anxiety, and improving because of the avoidance. Yeah, that's funny. Okay, any advice? Yeah. So this is like, I will absolutely say something that I struggle with in some ways myself, because at first it can absolutely feel like, man, if I avoid all of this drama and this dysfunctional people, then I feel way better. Avoidance seems like a great strategy. And I should just avoid everything in life and then I'll be happy if I avoid all these people. And this is why it's dangerous, because it can actually improve your life temporarily. It's just kicking the can down the road for most people in most situations. We should break away from toxic people. And it is important to know our boundaries and set up our limitations and working with our limitations. Forgiving people is important for our mental health, but that doesn't mean that we have to restore accessibility to them. And while we are balancing our community, what I often say to people is to micro adjust along the way. So if you find that all of a sudden you have a conversation that goes bad, no big deal. Conversation on the same topic goes bad again. Okay, maybe this isn't the right person to talk to about that subject. Okay, no problem. So you talk about another subject goes bad. At a certain point, you just realize, I can't talk to this person about any subject. That's probably not going to be a close friend. But even then, you might be able to have some parts that are functioning and healthy. As much as I sometimes question this in myself, I know that it is a true statement that we as human beings are actually very dependent on others, not only for functioning in society, but also our mental health. We go pretty crazy pretty quick if we are trying to avoid. So if somebody is in this, I would just say, I might ask questions. People don't usually, especially if they don't trust people and they think avoidance is a good strategy for them to function better in society because they've been with too many toxic people. It's just curiosity. You can even say, I think it's great that you're finding cutting yourself off from certain people is helping you. But what happens if you cut yourself off from everyone? And trying to get them to reflect on these things. So hopefully they don't go too far in isolation mode before they realize that they actually needed other people. There's always these stories about somebody finding themselves in the woods and then they find the body later on because maybe they wandered off a little too far. Life is about balance. Anger has to be on the list too. This is a comment. Anger has to be on the list too. Fighting an ignorant medical system. So advice, because acceptance is not going to be in the equation. Acceptance is not going to be in the equation. Do you mean of the medical system in terms of like you're not going to accept that the medical system is ignorant? Because if so, that makes sense. Of course, you still have to acceptance. I would still say it's good to be in the equation. It just might not be that you're accepting that the medical system is going to be ignorant. Like you can fight something and accept it at the same time, right? You can accept the limitations of the medical system, accept that it's messed up, and still do everything in your power. Like acceptance does not mean that we stop. It's remember, accept, choose, and take action. Acceptance doesn't mean we stop taking action. Acceptance means that we are not ruminating on the things beyond our ability to influence, because we are focusing on the best choice of what actually reality life is offering us on life's terms. I hate the medical system. And I have a lot of anger. And I actually will say I have some, not only anger, but I would say even irrational fear of doctors. Not fear, distaste. No offense to any doctor who may not be listening, but I do not like doctors as a profession. And I would probably have suffered physically from my avoidance of doctors because I dislike them so much. I think that they are overly honored in today's society, that the industry itself is a lot about money, and they pretend like it's noble. I have a really hard time with that. I don't care if it's a church, a doctor's office, or mental health stuff. If you are pretending to be about what is best for the individual, but you have policies that only make sense when you focus on finances, I'm not happy with you. I don't mind when you are straightforward about the fact that you're in it for the money, but don't pretend to be noble and truly only care about the money, right? You have to be willing to have policies that put priority on the individual if you're going to present yourself as that being the focus. If you have policies that present money as the priority, then you have to be honest about that for my own morality and ethics and everything like that. But that's not the world we live in. So I have to accept that and still engage. Are they not giving you answers? Maybe a functioning medical doctor, one person says. The other person says accepting the diagnosis is a no-go. Yeah, well, that's fair. Okay, and diagnosis, when it comes to therapy, it guides treatment. I don't know if it works exactly the same in the medical industry, but I definitely think we should not let a diagnosis define our reality or limit our lives. So I'll give you this. Okay, going back to my chronic pain and a little my story with the medical industry and why I don't like doctors so much. Not only would I finally saw a neurologist that had a really good reputation, and she told me that they don't really have any great help for me. And people, my very specific condition. Hey, good morning. Welcome to the chat. Hope you're feeling better. It took so many doctors and so many years of wasting my money and time for false hope with finally getting a doctor that was just honest with me that we didn't really have any great help. I would have rather had that so that I could just focus on making the best choices I had available. And eventually I did figure it out through exercise and diet. Does it mean that I don't have the condition anymore? No, I have the condition. I've had to accept that and adapt my life from that condition, which does create limits. But honestly, time is the biggest hurdle, time and energy that I have to spend focusing on things that I wouldn't necessarily put as high a priority, but all of them are healthy things for my life that I've done. So I have to be a lot more careful about what I eat, a lot more dedicated to exercising, doing more fasting, and try to sleep. That's the hard one for me. But all of that, adaptation really does produce health for me. And it was really frustrating going to doctors and sometimes being prescribed pills that they lied about what those pills were, that were off label, that the doctors were getting kickbacks for, and had huge side effects. So like one was a antidepressant medication that causes seizures, and the other was an anti-seizure medication that they told me was migraines, and one that was preventative and one that would help stop a migraine when it was first starting. Coincidentally, those drug companies were giving doctors big kickbacks to prescribing their drugs. But they're just there for my best interests. So that's really frustrating. All that to say, when you're dealing with anger is meant to be, when it's primary, protective. And so in this case, it's pretty obvious that your anger not only is justified frustration because the medical system and industry is terrible, but also your natural defense mechanism to protect yourself. And the hard part is it needs momentum. It needs somewhere to move forward towards, whatever that is, or it's going to be tempted to ruminate. And anger is not actually toxic at all if it's primary and directed and has a place to go. But when we try to hold on to it, it does terrible things to our body and our mind. So we've got to figure out what's the next step that we can actively take that is aligned with our values. And if there isn't one, what's a way that we can vent out that anger so that it doesn't just stay inside and make us feel worse? Second opinion is obviously a very practical advice too. But knowing the person that we're talking about, I would not be surprised if she got many second opinions already. Sorry, Miss Church. I feel like death. Love you though. Well, I love you too. Thanks for coming on to the chat, even though you feel like death. I hope you feel better soon. Thoughts and prayers are with you, brother. So in accepting, choosing, and taking action with anything in our life, right, we look at the things in life that are uncomfortable. And again, it's like, it's not even necessarily focused on the external of like, sure, I want to accept the things I cannot change about everyone else, but I also want to accept myself and the way that I feel about it, right? So I have to accept my anger. One of my favorite metaphors, and ACT loves to use metaphors, is this bus metaphor. So if you're driving the bus and say you've got anger that's riding the bus, so think of the anger as one of the passengers on the bus. Maybe even think about physical pain as one of the messengers on the bus. So it's passengers on the bus, and they're complaining, turn this bus around, right? And they're saying all these nasty things to us. Well, what are our options? As a bus driver, one thing is we could drive wherever those noisy monster passengers tell us to drive. But then we're never going to get to the destination that we want to go. And so we shouldn't be surprised if we're miserable because we're letting the worst parts of us, or the parts of us that are most frustrated and complaining, driving the bus, okay, directing where we go in our lives. Our other thing is we could pull over and we could try to throw that passenger off the bus. One of the problems with this is anger, as I said, is actually protective. So your anger that is angry at the medical system that is not helping and set up poorly is justified and is trying to motivate you to do the best you can with being your advocate for your own physical health. So even though that passenger can be one that is difficult to ride with, it also is one that is not your enemy. It is trying to help you. So you don't want to actually get rid of your anger. That's maybe one of the interesting things about ACT, that is the nuance that is so powerful with all of this. When we talk about diffusion, we're talking about seeing your thoughts and feelings as separate, but still part of who you are. So it's not your whole identity, but they still are there for a reason. And sometimes when we show people this ACT tools, they often think that their job is to try to get rid, like success means I no longer feel angry. Success means I'm no longer sad ever. No, sadness and anger are primary emotions. I hope as a therapist that you have them for the rest of your life, just in appropriate moments, and you know how to deal with them. And when you know how to deal with these things, they no longer destroy your life. Even if there was something that was riding the bus that was totally terrible and bad, and there was no good about that thought, feeling, emotion, pulling the bus over and trying to get that off, you have already let that thing run your life by giving it all that attention, and you're no longer driving to where you want to go. Now, I haven't been on a noisy bus for a long time, but oh my gosh, sometimes it's hard to drive a bus when there's all these noisy passengers complaining at us, and keep it heading in the right direction. But that is how life works. And if we get to these beautiful destinations, we're going to feel way better about our life than if we try any other approach. So when we hear all those things, we going back to this is what acceptance actually looks like. It's not necessarily saying I'm no longer going to try to do anything to change my life. That is actually avoidance, not acceptance, right? And that, I think, is one of the, it's one of the things that I'm just going to say it. There's a book out there. I was like, I don't want to bash people that like this or the author specifically, but there's this woman out there who wrote a book called Let Them, which she stole that concept. And the concept in general is like a very watered down version of acceptance. So it's like taking the therapeutic tools that have developed from ACT and dialectical behavioral therapy and other really powerful tools and kind of making the TikTok version of it. And people buy those books because they're really good at marketing. Let Them sounds great, but the difference between acceptance and Let Them is Let Them, while simpler to understand, can be often wrong and hurtful in multiple situations. If it was acceptance dumbed down to Let Them, then I would absolutely say, please don't practice acceptance, right? Don't let them, right? But when it comes to acceptance as processing our feelings, thoughts, and attitudes about things, but in a way that diffuses them and doesn't let them drive the bus, that's what we mean when we come to acceptance. Someone says, stress is definitely a passenger on my bus. And here's a great example. If you want a purpose-driven life, anxiety and stress are positively correlated with purpose-driven. And there's another really dumb book out there about the subtle art of not giving a, and then it has like the asterisks and clearly is a swear word or whatever. Yeah, like, again, can be helpful for some people. I read it. It was helpful for me for a time, but not a recipe for a life worth living. It's actually a recipe for disaster. It's like that isolation of avoidance and thinking, I've found the secret to life, happiness. I just need to avoid people. And then wondering 5 years later why you're isolated, depressed, and no longer want to live anymore. It's like, because you need community and love, and that's how people are built. So, stress, if we go, oh, I just need to do whatever it takes to be less stressed, we are often walking away from a life worth living. We're walking away from the things that we most passionately care about because those are the things we get stressed by. Thank you for the person saying, I appreciate you saying this. Okay, another. A stands for anger, C stands for confrontation with peer-reviewed articles, and T stands for taking control. Yeah, A stands for anger, C stands for confrontation, and T stands for taking control. That's a different ACT acronym than acceptance and than accept, choose, and take action. But we have multiple that we can use. Yeah, and so again, depending on what we mean and how we move forward in it, anger can absolutely be motivation and give us momentum. So this is genetically what it's designed for. It fills us with adrenaline. Part of the problem with anger in today's society is that normally the things that anger us most are things that we can't immediately respond to. And the design is, I've got a tiger at my door. I have a bear that's fighting me in the woods, and I need a pump full of adrenaline to get this inner strength that allows me to fight off, scare off, or get away from that bear so that I can survive. That's the design for anger, or more, even more so, maybe it's about to kill my family and I'm tired and sleepy, but all of a sudden I need an adrenaline pump to push me to be able to protect my family in that scenario. That's why we are given anger. And when we have anger or anxiety over something that is like paperwork to file, that is going to take 3 months to actually even get any momentum on, it can crash our nervous system and cause a lot of compounding negative effects on our health. So when it comes to, maybe one day we'll more perfectly understand that connection between mental health and physical health, but they absolutely are interwoven. And while it's not true that you can just think yourself into wellness when it comes to every physical condition, there obviously is an influence, and placebo effect teaches us this, that for a drug to be allowed to be put on the market, that has to perform better than the placebo. But what we often pass over is the fact that a placebo, which has no negative side effects, by the way, does actually consistently produce positive effects. So it's like a little sugar pill does actually consistently improve our health. And we can harness that ability to at least have a more positive attitude on this. So what do we do with this? Life is about balance. I like journaling because you can look at all of it and process it together. And when you start to put it on paper, your thoughts start to organize yourself. But when we are looking at our anger with not judgment, but curiosity, we're, instead of thinking, should I be angry or not? One of the R&R videos that I did this week was on emotion has momentum, and we often cannot stop it. And if we try to all of a sudden stop our emotion, it might come at a greater cost to our mental health than if we steer it. And that steering it is often the better direction to go than to try to stop it. So if we're feeling really angry and then I'll say, stop being angry. Oh, great. That's going to work. You know, it's like, even if you tried that for yourself, it wouldn't work. And if somebody else tried it with you, it definitely would not work. It would escalate the anger for most people most of the time. Same with stress. Just stop being stressed out. Oh, thank you. Now you fixed my problem. I no longer feel stressed whatsoever, right? Understanding and accepting, like one of them is agency. Finding a way to restore your agency can really help when you're struggling with a lot of things that are outside of your control. So what do I mean? Agency is our ability to choose. And when I'm struggling with chronic pain, it is so difficult to have a sense of agency, because when we're physically unhealthy, we have such more limits on us. And so how do we do that? We have to think about, what choices can I make here? And then move towards whatever choices are best of what we have. And sometimes we get stuck because we're focusing too much on cure, solution, fix, rather than improvement, step forward, and just trying to focus on building that momentum towards what is health in that situation. True, stress often helps me get things done, somebody says, but sometimes it's not necessarily or helpful. So when we have stress in the proper category, diffuse but still there, right? No longer attached as, I am stressed, but rather I'm having feelings of stress right now. And I have curiosity towards that. These are the reasons why I have feelings towards stress. I can more often properly process it in a way that helps me get things done rather than having it be overwhelming and then blow up and cause difficulty. Now, these are skill sets that are not necessarily things that we just immediately, oh, he explained it and now I get it, right? We often have to build that capacity. One of the metaphors I often use is going from the light switch to the dimmer. So we naturally have a light switch. I am stressed, I'm calm, right? It's on or off. I'm angry, I'm not angry, right? I'm happy, I'm sad. With all of these things, it is really helpful to no longer have it be a light switch and have it be a dimmer. If we allow ourselves to be a little angry, but not so angry that we're yelling at people and breaking our values, which will create a compounding effect where we'll beat ourselves up, we'll be angry at ourselves for being angry, we'll distance ourselves from relationships, and we'll have more and more problems because we're overly being protective, into a dimmer that we're allowing ourselves to be angry. And at first it might be a lot more often, but less intensity. We become better at processing our anger, and we end up no longer having anger that blows up and destroys our lives. This is true for sadness too. A lot of people that grew up in families where if you cry, I'll give you something to cry about, grow up to then have a really negative relationship with their sadness, and they are trying to convince themselves and others that they're happy all the time, until all of a sudden they blow up with sadness. And because they haven't been processing their sadness on a regular basis, it is overwhelming and it does destroy their life, which then has a negative feedback loop because they have an even more negative view on sadness. They're convinced sadness must be terrible because every time it shows up in their lives, it ruins everything and distances themselves from people because they're not likable when they're sad. It's like, well, you might be if you dimmed it instead of had it be a light switch. If you are going from I'm happy all the time to everything sucks and I hate you and I hate life and I hate myself, and yeah, that's not fun to be around. But if you see that sadness actually is a reflection on love and beauty, it helps you to see it. Bittersweet, by the way, is a great book to read on this, that it can be dimmed instead of a light switch, present at all times in a way that no longer negatively affects your life. If you're not a reader and you like watch a movie, you could watch Inside Out. It's a kid's movie, but actually the relationship between joy and sadness are perfectly reflected in this as really good psychology. I have to give whoever made, I think it's Pixar, that movie, credit that they actually were right on when it comes to mental health research. Your sermon talked about having a purpose goal but not being able to obtain it yet. What do you think would be helpful in that spot? Yeah, I mean, basically I was talking about the concept of ambiguous loss, which is where we cannot mourn yet because technically the thing that we want and desire is still possible, but there's no pathway forward towards that goal. So we're struggling and tempted to ruminate or just be miserable. We can fall into despair. Hope is difficult when there's no pathway forward. I really like, and I do come from a Christian culture background, so like there's some Christian concepts that are, very comfortable with. I think stewardship is one of them. I don't think that's a secular concept that people talk about a lot. Let me know if that's not true. That might not be true, but I heard it in Christian context. And the idea of stewardship, I really like for a lot of reasons. One of them is a steward doesn't own anything. So it's not ultimately the responsibility of the steward to make sure everything goes right. They just need to know that they're doing their part. And when you are aware that you don't own everything or anything, it allows you still care, you still want to do a good job. So it's not like what does this matter, it's not mine, right? In some ways, for some of us, me included, it actually makes us more motivated to take care of something. Like, for instance, I have in the past had a really negative self regard. I did not see myself as worthy, but when I saw myself as a child of God, and I thought of even my body as something I had to be a steward over, my mind, my heart as a steward over, it actually motivated me to take better care of it, because I'm like, oh, this belongs to God. And so I want to make sure I care for it, even if it's not something that I necessarily like, because it's not mine, it's his. And if I think of everything in life as borrowed energy from God, it matters. And so I want to be a good steward of those things, so I don't throw things around, I don't waste them, I don't, so all that to say, the best that I can see when you're in that place of where you have this yearning, you want to accept the yearning, diffuse it so it's part of you, but it's not the whole story. And you want to be able to be faithful in the waiting. So the story that I had used in the sermon was about this guy who had this prophecy over him that he was going to be a father of many. He's 99 years old, and he's got one kid, and that wasn't even ideal circumstances for that child. How do you hold on to that? Well, I would ask myself, am I being faithful in the waiting? Am I doing the best I can in the circumstances that I've been given? Is there something that I really should be diligent on? Like, for instance, and we're not going to go through the whole birds and the bees here on our YouTube live stream here, but there's something necessary to produce children, an activity that a man and a woman engage in. If the guy, which it doesn't talk about in the story one way or the other, but if the guy was never engaging in that activity, might have something to do with why he wasn't producing children, right? Probably not the reason, right? But like, am I being diligent to do what I'm supposed to be doing? If the answer is yes, then I'm doing my part, and I can still mourn, process, and keep moving forward as best I can. Another comment said, and anger ebbs as answers are found, and finding someone who listens and becomes a partner in obtaining answers. Yeah. So that anger as primary and motivating us to keep moving forward. And we seeing that, by the way, that alone, the reason I mention that not only is because hopefully it's helpful for everybody in the chat, but also is because when we understand the purpose of a feeling, it does help us actually to better have that dimmer switch, right? It has us better to handle it and manage it, because we go, oh, right, this is the purpose of this thing, so I can make sure I put it in the right place. But absolutely, finding someone who listens, there is something, research finds this out, or shows this to be true, that just expressing our emotions in front of another human being regulates it automatically. So expressing it in general regulates it somewhat, and having a faithful witness of someone who's watching with you, and even if they're not telling you anything, even if they're not actually even comforting you, hopefully they're not escalating conflict. That's a different story, right? Where they're frustrating you because they're coming up with fixes that don't actually work and you've already tried, or insulting you or minimizing your pain. As long as they're not a negative influence, if they're even just neutral and just listening, yeah, it actually regulates you more. If they reflect back accurate depiction of your feelings, that even more so regulates and helps you dim that switch, because it's like, oh, somebody hears me, somebody understands, and they get it, right? I'm not crazy. Regulates it. Because that negative feedback loop that we start to go crazy is partly often because we have a negative relationship with our feelings. And so if you think that you're just crazy, I've done it before, by the way. Long before I started studying clinical mental health counseling, I had someone who was dysregulated. Their emotions were going all over the place. And I said to him, "You're crazy." Now I know, worst thing could have said, like, not helpful at all. Now, what was going on, I now understand, is that they, as I say, Pascal quote, "The heart has reason that reason doesn't know." They were having a disproportionate emotional response to the circumstance because of past stuff that happened in their lives, that it was proportionate then. They're not crazy. And if I had gone through the same experiences, I probably would have had the same response, or maybe worse. So having somebody that hears you out and gets it is huge. I can tell you, at least everyone's been active in the chat that I know. You're not crazy. But some of us can be neurotic at times, and that's understandable if everyone knows what we come from and what all happened in our life. And having that posture when it comes to your own emotions and thoughts and feelings helps you to have a better relationship with you. And what ends up happening, and this is an extreme with like dissociative identity disorder, where people fall into multiple personalities. That's not me. That's Patricia, people say, that have, the evil side of them. We actually start to split into different personalities, different personas, different types. And then we can have a lot be in denial. What our goal is, and this is not ACT specifically, it's a different form of therapy. It's self-actualization. That's Carl Rogers' way of putting it, or integration. I actually said that word right. I almost never say that word right. Integration. So we want to integrate all of the parts of ourselves into one being that is at peace with themselves. And by the way, not that I've yet to obtain this all the time, but in moments where you're truly at peace with yourself, it actually makes outside circumstances almost irrelevant, because you still will have sadness, you still have stress, you still have anger, as it is appropriate to have it, but you have a positive relationship with those emotions and those feelings. And yes, to the comment that said Inside Out is a fabulous movie, really is. I will confess I haven't watched all of Inside Out 2. I was enjoying what I did watch. I don't remember why I stopped it, but I then didn't get back to it for so long that I have to start the movie over again. But I really loved Inside Out 1. And the therapeutic messaging was all on point. Great movie. So we're about at the end of our hour. So please tune in next time. Same bad time, same bad channel for 7 o'clock Eastern time with mental health chats and questions. Hopefully this was helpful for all you guys. I really appreciate everybody who participates in the chat, whether you're giving comments, questions. Thank you so much. I really love doing this. I'll be honest. I either really enjoy doing this or I hate doing this, depending on how active the chat is. So when I have to do a whole hour and like have no comments and questions, it's draining and tough for me. But when I have a bunch of comments and questions, I'm like, this was great. I loved it. Let's do this again. So please do keep participating in the chats, those who participated. And if you didn't participate in the chat, I don't like you. No, I'm just kidding. I still, of course, love you. Thank you for tuning in, and you can share it with others. Not everybody likes to chat. Always helpful. Thank you. What is not really ever, if someone said, what is not really ever getting angry at some things that most believe I should have felt angry about? I don't feel any anger, just a sadness. Maybe I'm too empathic, just don't get it. I get that, okay? And we're at the end of the hour, so I'm gonna have to be brief with my comments, but I will address that. This has been great. Thank you all for all. Thank you for all you do. Love you. Another comment. I appreciate that. I absolutely relate to that person who is saying that they didn't feel anger at all because maybe they're too empathic. So for me, I had completely shut down my ability to feel anger. And I'm not going to say this is true of you. I'm just saying this was true of me. The reason that I had shut down I had purposely shut down without knowing it, but you know, my Siri is trying to explain what's going on right now. Quiet, Siri. I got this. Siri's like, well, I'm not a therapist. I'm like, I am a therapist. No, but for what happened to me is that I had shut down my ability to self-protect because I thought the value of my life was in self-sacrifice. And since I had so stressed the ethic of self-sacrifice based on Christian culture, in which it's easy to think that that's what Christian culture says, even though Jesus said the two greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And my dad at one point pointed out to me that it's like, you know, it never said to love others with all your heart, soul, and strength. You're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. You're supposed to be a martyr, if anything, for God, but not for other people. I realized that I'd been doing it wrong and was growing codependency and shutting down my ability to self-protect. So yeah, that's been a therapeutic journey for me to get angry again. And it feels good. I mean, I'm still not a super angry person, but I love now having the ability to be angry. I'm always happy to make an appointment, anyone make an appointment. And if you'd like to make an appointment, you can text or call that number, 772-303-3034. That's 772-303-3034. It's pinned in the chat. We're always happy to help. All right. Thanks, guys. Love y'all. Have a great day. Wish you well.